असित एंड गूगल फॉर्म वो हो गया,
हाँ गूगल
अपडेट हो गया गूगल फॉर्म?
पुराना डेटा ना चला जाए।
हेलो असित,
अविनाश सिंह है क्या? अविनाश सिंह कौन है ये?
रुक जाओ अभी मत
प्रवीर
डालो
प्रवीर
लोगों को।
प्रवीर हाँ हाँ प्रवीर सर को देख रहा हूँ, बस उनको ना मिस कर दे हम बाहर।
We need to call him. Hello.
अच्छा, you need to call him. Just
Yeah.
call him फिर. Just
Yeah,
call him.
Yeah,
I'm calling.
Raghav,
I'm
call
calling.
him up
I'm
once.
calling him. I'm calling him.
Okay.
और असित देख लेना कि गूगल फॉर्म अपडेट हुआ है कि नहीं। यार असित इज नॉट देयर।
असित तो शायद गूगल फॉर्म में अपडेट करने का होगा। असित को कॉल कर ले श्वेता, कॉल कर ले उसको।
या
अरे मेरा म्यूट कर दिया था किसी ने।
ये भी हो सकता है, ये मत बोल भाई।
होस्ट कर सकता है ना?
अच्छा असित गूगल फॉर्म अपडेट कर दो।
मैं करता हूँ अभी।
So let me see. So hello. Hello.
हेलो।
Hello.
क्या?
ये हमसे बात कर रहे हैं।
प्रवीर सर आ गए, सुनो।
Guys, can you hear me?
प्रवीर सर
Hello?
आ गए, मैं ऐड कर रहा हूँ उन्हें, ठीक है?
हाँ.
Also Raghav, you remember the 3 instructions now? Ask
Yeah.
everyone to go on mute. Tell
Mute
them
and questions will be posted at the in the chat box.
chat
And
box
yeah, and we'll share the link for e-certificate at the end of the session.
at the end of the session.
Through a Google Doc. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a Google Doc or Google Form.
We'll share a link, right?
A link to the Google
Hello.
Form. Yeah.
A link to the Google form for
Yeah, not
e-certificates
the
will be
Google
shared
Doc.
at the end of the session. Okay. Form.
I believe Praveer sir is here. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Yes.
We're good.
Sir.
So we start at 5, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Sanjeev, should we start admitting people?
Yeah, we can.
Is my voice clear? You want me to plug in the headphones?
You can plug in
I
the
think it's
headphones.
fine.
It's clear.
Some people just ask on the chat box.
In case there is any problem with my, voice, so it's cracking or something, just let me know. I'll plug in the earphones.
Sure, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Hello. Okay.
କଣ ମୁଁ କାଇଁ ଦେଖିବି କିଏ କାଇଁ ମତେ ଦେଖିବ ହଁ ବା ସେ ଦେଖିବ
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we start the session?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Raghav Khandelwal, and I am a moderator for the present session. Today, we have an amazing session on the policy side of politics and its relevance in post-COVID era. Our guest speaker for today's session is a very talented, vastly knowledgeable, and newly influential legislative and policy advisor, Mr. Praveer Srivastav. Giving a brief background about Sir, Praveer Sir is an alumni of SLS Noida, batch 2015. He pursued his master's in administrative and constitutional law from GNLU. He worked as a LAMP fellow for an year, and he assisted member of parliaments during his LAMP fellowship. In 2017, he took up as he worked as a legislative, political, and policy advisor to the Member of Parliament Rajiv Satwa, the then 16th member of 16th Lok Sabha. Praveer Sir is currently working as an independent legislative and policy advisor, assisting member of parliaments across the party lines on various parliamentary affairs, policy formulation, and strategic issues related to constituencies. Before we proceed with the session, I would like to request all of you to kindly mute your, keep yourself on mute. And if in case you have any questions, post it in the chat box. We'll take it up in the end or during the Q&A round. We'll share the link for e-certificate at the end through a chat box. Let's begin the session, and I would like to welcome Praveer Sir for taking his valuable time for us. I would request you, sir, to kindly enlighten us and introduce us about your journey from a law graduate to being an independent legislative and political advisor. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Raghav. First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. Probably yes, I wouldn't have thought so much highly about myself. So the way that you put it forward. And first of all, I'll congratulate the Curious for Law team for in the current situation, and the amount of participation that is being seen to all these webinars is brilliant. So first of all, congratulations to your team, and special heads up to my friend Shubham Arya also for organizing and inviting me over to address the people on an issue which I think probably has taken a lot of significance in what has happened in the recent times. So as far as my introduction is concerned, I started off with, I graduated from Symbiosis Law School, Noida in 2015. And like a normal law student who dreams of getting to Amarchand or becoming a Ram Jethmalani in times to come, I also entered with that same, motivation and, trying to achieve that thing. But with the process of time, once you enter into law school, a lot of things that you had planned out do not end up happening. Okay. So the same was with my case. I remember I had a PPO in the last year of my law school, but by the time the law school ended, I decided to sit for the CLAT examinations for the for the LLM entrance. So I got through a good rank. I chose GNLU in the first instance, went for my master's there, studied constitutional law, and in GNLU I was planning to apply for the LAMP fellowship during my undergraduate days itself, but due to some reasons because of the LLM mostly, I decided to postpone it for another year. So when I went to GNLU, I applied for that fellowship. I think the applications opened somewhere in January. I got through the fellowship. I went through the fellowship. In the fellowship, I got a chance to work with the BJP MP. And after the end of my fellowship, I got an offer from, as you mentioned, Mr. Rajiv Satwa, who was a Lok Sabha member of Parliament in the 16th Lok Sabha, and he's currently been nominated from the Rajya Sabha. So I worked with him for approximately 2.5 years till his term ended in the 16th Lok Sabha. And from November, I started my own policy work where I'm involved in advising a lot of members of parliament across party lines on parliamentary affairs, their constituency related issues. And in addition to that, I also advise them on some part of their media activities. So this has been my journey so far in this particular area of law, you can say, or professional discourse.
That's really great to hear a brief introduction about you, sir. I have a question to put forth. Why didn't you choose, a conventional career, maybe a litigation, being a litigation lawyer or a corporate lawyer? Why did you choose up, policy sector as your career and academic goals? And what expectations did you have did you had when you were willing to venture into this field, and what are whether these expectations are fulfilled so far, and what's your take on that?
See, I would call my entering into policy field, it's more of an accident than a planned move. Okay, I call it an accident because the first time I decided to do something like this was a Lamb Fellowship. So after my LLM, also I was planning to apply to some law firms, but before I could think of that, I got selected for the Lamb Fellowship. So the Lamb Fellowship, at that point of time, it was gaining traction with the everybody was getting to know that what it is about. So the conventional mindset of any person who doesn't know how a politician works is like they don't have any job. So if the MPs don't have any job, then what does the Lamb do?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it is just like, going in a lawyer's chambers who doesn't have any job and still interning with it. So that was, a very difficult, I won't call it difficult. I was convinced for the fact because I had heard a lot of experiences from a lot of, bright people who had done the Lamb Fellowship earlier. So I spoke to them and everybody, gave me a heads up that, okay, you can go ahead with it. So I decided to go to the Lamb Fellowship, and the Lamb Fellowship, I think for anybody who has done that fellowship, it's an eye opener that, politics is not a, easy business. That is the first notion that, gets cleared, that if you think that politics is an easy business, that is the biggest misnomer you are, living in. So that, opened my eyes for the fact that, politicians have a lot of job, and that is the only profession which is multidimensional. Okay. So, and I remember one of the very senior leaders of a political party, he, once told me about a politician. He said that, see, you can be trained to be a lawyer, you can be trained to be a doctor, but nobody can train you to be a politician. Right. There is no training. No school can teach you how to be a politician. No school can teach you how to be a leader. Okay.
Exactly.
It comes a lot out of your experience. It comes a lot out of, how your professional journey has been. So politics is, I call it it's a place which kind of not only contributes to how the country is run, but, it's a meeting point of people from different backgrounds.
Okay.
So if you analyze the people who are sitting in the parliament, you'll find somebody is a doctor, you'll find somebody is a businessman, you'll find somebody is a retired IAS officer, you'll find somebody is a social service person, you'll find somebody from the media. Okay, so it is a mixed bag. It is not that the traditional or conventional thinking of people of a politician that he could be somebody who's just sitting laid back, sitting in an SUV with 5 people carrying gunmen around and doing all notorious stuff. That that is the biggest misnomer that needs to be cleared.
Exactly.
And during my Lamb Fellowship, I was working with the BJP MP, and I say that my Lamb batch has been the most fortunate for 2 reasons. One, that time I did my Lamb Fellowship in 2016-17. So that in that whole course of that fellowship, we had the GST to begin with, we had demonetization to another step, then we had the UP elections, then we had the surgical strikes. Okay, so we had a very interesting tenure for 1 year. And unfortunately, what happened, the winter session was a washout in that year because of demonetization protests. Okay, so all the most of the lambs were like, yeah, the parliament is functioning, what is the point of being in the fellowship? Okay, we are not getting to learn anything on policy. But
Yes.
see, apart from policy, what you need to learn is that how a member of parliament or a politician deals with people.
Exactly.
Okay, because dealing with people is a very difficult job. And why I say so, because on an average, because I read a lot of articles of, I have a lot of debate with people who say that the judiciary is very overburdened, the district judge has so much work to do, he has no things. Imagine an MP represents a constituency which falls in 2 districts at a time. The average electorate of an MP is close to 15 lakhs.
Okay.
What? Okay. The people who are not, who don't have a voter's card or who are below the age of, voting age, if you account for them, and, an average Lok Sabha constituency is somewhere around 30 to 35 lakhs. To cater to those 30 to 35 lakhs, which include people who vote for you and people who don't vote for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have to cater to both of them.
Both of them.
Anybody who turns up at your door saying that MP Saab or Sansad ji mujhe madad chahiye, you cannot say that you have not voted for me, I'll push you off. Okay, and the biggest problem is that you have to go to that public again after 5 years.
Exactly.
Your job is not done. You've cleared the exam, you're sitting on that chat, doesn't mean that your job is done now. In the next 5 years, you again go and face the public.
Okay.
And what do you face the public with? Okay, your performance, how much accessible you are. Okay, so in the Lamb Fellowship, that is one thing that, that was an eye-opener for me to understand that how politicians work in this country. Okay, not just beyond the realm of parliamentary affairs, but also in the personal matters. You could have somebody coming up with you with as minuscule as getting a railway ticket confirmed,
Exactly.
and as big as getting somebody transferred.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the most minute job of a politician that I'm trying to put across. Apart from that, in the Lamb Fellowship, I had the opportunity to work on the GST. Okay. The GST constitutional amendment was just when I joined the fellowship, within 15 days, that bill was brought before the House. Okay. And I was I can easily say, when I saw Mr. Arun Jaitley defending that bill, and I request all of you who haven't been through that debate, just watch that man speak. Okay. He has defended that bill in the most, answering every minutest details of that bill. And GST from independence till date is probably considered as, a very big legislation, which reforms something called indirect taxation.
Exactly.
Direct taxation is limited to certain people. But in India, everybody is covered under indirect taxation somewhere or the other. For direct taxation, you have a bracket. Okay, you have to pay this amount if you are, paying this much. But indirect taxation is, any item you buy that is covered by indirect taxation. So that is something, I got to know the nuances of GST, that GST is just not about taxation. It was also a fight between the bureaucracy. The reason why GST took so much of time till date was because the state bureaucracy and the central bureaucracy, particularly the taxation officers, were at a fight that they might, have to cede a lot of their powers. Okay, so GST was one thing, I enjoyed watching in the Lamb Fellowship, and my first, entry into the parliament, it was like once you entered, and it was a very, difficult point that in the Lamb Fellowship, what happened that when I entered the first time into the parliament, that is also makes for a very interesting story. I entered on the last day of the monsoon session, and by the time I could enter in, the house got adjourned. Okay, so my first visit to the parliament was only to the gates of it. Okay, so I went to the gate and the house got adjourned, but luckily, I could see everybody whom I had seen on TV, because after the adjournment, everybody walks out of the parliament to give their news bites to different media channels. So I remember watching everybody, and I was like, okay, I have seen them on TV, this is that, they are so. But when you see them in their natural, what you call habitat in the parliament, everybody is, discussing things which we would not, think about.
Exactly.
So after my Lamb Fellowship ended, I got a call from the office of Mr. Rajiv Sattva, who was a member of parliament in the 16th Lok Sabha, and at that point of time, he was also the AIC secretary for Gujarat. So, and that is how, a lot has to be said that accidents happen for a good cause also. So I went to Gujarat, a year back for my studies. Okay, and 1 year back, I joined a person who is in charge of that whole state. Okay, so because I had a lot of Gujarati friends, so okay, it was easier for me to also understand some part of Gujarati. Because, a lot of candidates come for the ticket, a lot of candidates come for campaigning. So, and Gujarat election, for whoever has, watched it or managed to follow the Gujarat election, it was probably the most hotly contested state election that I've seen in the recent future. Because everybody was going all out on each other, because it was primarily the home state of the Prime Minister, and then the BJP chief and the now Home Minister. So it was a, pure out and out battle for everybody. Everybody was, because, and the fact of the matter was also that demonetization and GST, one of the few states which impacted the maximum out of it was Gujarat. Okay. And you had the Patidar agitation. There were so many things that happened. So, that helped me to understand that elections are a very serious business, and you require a very minute management to win an election.
Okay.
Because BJP, even after, there was so much of anti-incumbency, 22 years of rule and everything. After that also, they managed to get a majority. Okay. Despite the fact that there was so much resentment in Gujarat. Okay. So I feel that was something that, made me, learn a lot of things about policy making. Was obviously, one of that. But apart from that, what you also learn is the fact that how elections are managed. And, in every profession, it is said that once you start your, journey in a particular line, it is always important that the person you work with, how is that person be? Okay, in my case, I was fortunate enough to work with, Mr. Rajiv Sattva, because he had his influence both within the parliament and also as the organizational man. Okay, so I understood that how organizational politics or a party politics works, along with the fact that how elections are managed and how parliament works. And luckily, for me, it was an achievement for the fact that Mr. Satav, by the time I worked with him, he won the Best Parliamentarian Award for 2 terms.
Okay.
Okay. So that also was it was like a very happy feeling that, okay, parliamentarians also get award for their performance.
Okay.
So in that office, I learned a lot about, how politics, and that's why the term I use, that the policy side of politics. Okay.
Okay.
Policy is something that, imbibes a lot of things. Policy is not just what the government does. Policy is, prevalent at every level, impacts every person in and out. Okay. So with that, I understood the functioning of the parliament. And because he won in the opposition, as people, say that being in a minority at times helps. Okay. Because Congress was, reduced down to 44 at that point of time. So you get more space and you get more leverage to put your point.
Exactly.
Okay. So that was a very good point that I learned in the office of Mr. Rajiv Satav. And as a person or as a member of parliament, he was somebody who was a mix of convention and, a young leader.
Okay.
So he had his elements of being a conventional politician also, but he was also receptive to a lot of new ideas. So for example, when I joined his office 6 months back, the lamb who was working in his office, he had prepared something called a paternity benefit bill. Okay. So you had the maternity benefit, like the mothers who are, expecting a child, they will probably, be given leave. So he raised his lamb suggested him that, so why don't we bring something on the lines of the paternity thing? Because, childhood care is a shared responsibility. You cannot just impose it on the mother. You also have to give equal leverage to the father. So he brought something called the paternity benefit bill, okay, which got a lot of attention. A lot of media houses wrote about it. A lot of things reported about it. And just because of that paternity benefit, he was accorded an invitation from the Norway embassy to have a trip to Norway. Okay. And understand how the system is in Norway, because Norway is one of the pioneers in terms of shared parental leave. Okay, so if you think that Indian politicians are not tracked by foreign countries and embassies, trust me, if you work in a politician's office, he has more invitations from embassy rather than his own party. Okay, for events like collaborating or speaking on a lot of things. Okay, so Mr. Rajiv Satav, he decided not to contest the 17 Lok Sabha elections. So when the 17 Lok Sabha was constituted, I was approached by a lot of new MPs who had come from Maharashtra. Okay, so the chain was it was kind of a chain reaction, and that I got a lot of MPs who wanted me to assist them in the parliamentary affairs. So from there, I started advising a lot of members of parliament across party lines. They were from the treasury benches, some were from the ruling party, and some were even neutral parties who support none of them. Okay, and in my current profile, I advise them on the parliamentary affairs, their constituency issues, that what do they want to pick up in their constituencies, what are the demands of the constituents, what can be applied in the constituency, what developmental projects can be brought in the constituency, and how you can probably make an impact. Because why I call this is it's a tightrope walk for a person who works with a politician, because the fact of the matter is that what a politician speaks, okay, there's an element of trust between you and the person you are preparing the brief for. Okay, you prepare a brief for a lawyer, he appears in court, he makes a mistake that might not get reported. You write something for a parliamentarian, he speaks that in the wrong fashion in the parliament, and you end up being a meme.
Yeah, exactly.
So you also have to take care of the fact that whatever you are writing, it is foolproof.
Foolproof, yeah.
Because you have a lot of it's just like a classroom. A second person will just stand up and rebut your point, and if you are not backed by substantial data or points, you cannot help it. Okay, so in my current profile, I have worked for asking questions to the government, bringing a private members bill, working on constituency related issues, working also on standing committee meetings. So those of you who are not aware of the standing committee meeting, it's it's a mechanism to keep a check on the government departments.
Okay.
So the people I advise, they are they sit on committees varying from the data protection committee to IT committee to health to personal and grievances. Okay, so I have a varied level of work that has to be done. So this is about the work that I am associated with. And
okay, that was really very enriching for experience for us. Sir, hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So though you mention it as an accidental hit, but I would say definitely you gathered a lot of experience out of that accidental hit. I would request you to kindly share us you definitely would have observed that if in case you would have known that you wanted to land up in policy during your years in a college, academic years, you would have framed your academic pursuits in certain way and structure. So if in that case, most of them want to, most of them want to know about it, that how we can frame our academic pursuits, our internships, and other curricular activities, so that we make we at the end we make a better policy advisor when we land up into the profession. So what's your take on that?
See, for policy, see, the first prerequisite is that you have to have a very good, knowledge about politics. The problem, with Indian, mindset is that you focus on information and not on knowledge. Okay. Information is for everybody to see. Knowledge is a more, deeply intrinsic thing. So, for example, when I was, and I would take myself also an example for that. That once I entered the parliament, I was not very clear about the fact that what standing committees are. Okay, and you used to see only people standing up in the house and speaking. So I was not aware of something that standing committees are there. So the first ingredient for if you want to enter into something called a policy advisory or a policy thing, the first thing that you need to understand is that you have to have a very good understanding of politics and how political governance works.
Exactly.
Okay, if you do not, and it's just like political governance for policy is just like nervous system to that whole setup. So what you need to understand that the political journey of the country, okay, how this country has developed, evolved, or come to this particular level after 70 years of independence. You need to understand that every politician, every governance structure had its own ways of dealing with things. Okay. So you need to have a very good grasp on what is happening right now. So I know a lot of people they didn't have the understanding of what is the difference between a law and a policy. Right. If you ask a lot of people, they'll still be a bit confused that what is a law and what is a policy.
Yeah.
Right. So and in matters of governance, policy is something that is targeted. And law is something that is generic in most of the cases. Okay. So, for example, if I were to talk about a law, so I think the most debated law in current times had been the CAB, the Citizenship Amendment Bill. Okay, there was a lot of protest happening, everything happening. People were going on the roads. Somebody had some aspect to it. The ruling party had some aspect to it. But what you need to understand is that everybody has their agenda sorted in bringing that bill or opposing that bill. Okay. It is not just a mere policy. It is also something that is going to garner you something in the coming elections.
Okay.
And that reminds me of a very famous quote by, the former American President Roosevelt. He said that in politics, nothing happens by accident. Okay. And if you were to believe so, it is definitely planned.
Exactly.
Okay. So anything that is done in politics it is done with a lot of planning. You plan, you see the repercussions of it, and then you take it forward. Okay. So if coming back to your question that how somebody has to devise his structure if he wants to get into policy making. See, in our times, policy making was not that big a profession. Because we were all into that conventional mindset of joining a law firm, joining a litigation practice, giving the judiciary examination. Everybody was into that. Okay. So policy per se, people have to understand that you have to, policy is something that is applicable to everybody's profession. So for example, when I had interned with the then Solicitor General of India back in 2014, at that point of time, the Aadhaar Act was challenged. Okay. So I got a lot of, understanding about Aadhaar, which helped me in the later stage. How? Because when I was, into the fellowship, the Aadhaar Act had come for discussion in the parliament. Okay. So because of my experience of researching, about Aadhaar at that point of time, I could understand that how it is going to work in the future. Okay, and one more example was that for that Aadhaar matter only, at that point of time, the right to privacy, arguments were going on in the court, and there were a lot of discussions about whether right to privacy should be a fundamental right or not. So that that experience of mine working in a lawyer's chamber eventually helped me in that. And why I say, that you cannot, streamline or, compartmentalize kinds of internship, because, everything in policy is generalized. Okay. The policy and the law, and, I always say that, Parliament is the biggest employer for lawyers, especially. If the Parliament doesn't make laws, what are the lawyers going to argue?
Do
Right?
absolutely
What are
right.
the news anchors going to shout about?
Yeah.
What are stand-up comedians going to speak about? Okay,
That's so
so
true.
there was a lot of you have to understand that Parliament does a lot of job, which leads to not only direct employment but indirect employment as well. Okay, so the I would advise, for the fact of the matter, that if you should definitely do 1 or 2 internships in people who are into policy. Like Niti Aayog is one example, Nyay is one example, Center for Civil Society is one example. Because in policy also you have a lot of bifurcations. You have a tech policy, you have an agriculture policy, you have an urban development policy. Okay, so it's like a huge ocean in which you have a lot of different ingredients to it. So you will have to work in different policy sectors and then understand that what is the sector which is of interest to you. And now I've also tried and promoted the MPs I work with to that they also should take an initiative and take up interns.
Interns.
Okay, because parliamentarians are also Shashi Tharoor takes up a lot of interns. So Mr. Sindhia used to take a lot of interns. So the well-read MPs, they have their internship processes in place.
Okay.
So okay, that is also one way of doing it. And in a law firm, if you work in a corporate office or if you work with the litigation team, you deal with policy on a whole because you research on a law.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of the advisory in corporate is usually on any new policy. So for example, the government has raised the investment limit, the definition of MSME now. So if you are an MSME and you are not being guided by the fact that the limit has been changed, how are you going to, go with that compliance measure? And if you don't go into the compliance measure, you end up in, facing a lot of litigation.
Exactly.
So once you face a lot of, litigation, that creates a lot of problem. So, understanding of policy is very important. Because if you don't understand policy, it, gets a lot of problem. And I remember before the 2014 election, the major plank on which BJP fought this election was policy paralysis. Right.
Okay.
The current situation also, you see every opposition member saying that his government ki policy theek nahi hai, foreign policy is bad, economic policy is bad, this is bad. But what do you mean by policy is the question?
Okay.
Right. You have
That's
to
true.
understand that policy is a multi-dimensional thing.
Multi-dimensional. Yeah.
Right. So for my recommendation to everybody who plans to, work in this sector, that, from the first year or second year, whenever you make up your mind to do this, you should always, understand the fact that there are different sectors to it. So just like you decide that whether you want to be in a dispute resolution team or a general corporate team or a banking team, you also have to decide that what policy do you want to work on.
Okay.
Okay, so I think you need to explore a lot of things before you finally take a decision on what you need to do.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Sir, as you can see in the chat box also, and I'm even curious to know about LAMP Fellowship. What it is all about, and how did you apply for it, and what's the curriculum of LAMP Fellowship, and how it helped you in developing and being a really great legislative and policy advisor. All about LAMP Fellowship, which you can tell us.
See, LAMP Fellowship, I'll call it one of its kind in India because that is something I credit, and you need to credit PRS for that because PRS came up with the fellowship. And the idea behind the fellowship was actually conceived by 3 people, 3 young members of parliament at that point of time. One was Mr. Anurag Thakur, who is now the Minister of State for Finance. One was Mr. I think Kalikesh Singh Deo, who was an MP in the 16th Lok Sabha, and one was Mr. Jayant Chaudhary. Okay, so these 3 people, I think they had gone for a tour to USA. So you have a lot of parliamentary delegations to visit when you are a member of parliament. So they had gone to the United States for a visit, and there they came across that senators and congressmen, they have interns attached to them. So they thought that in a economy or a country which is developed like America, if they need people, interns to help them, why don't the Indian parliamentarians should have such a system in place?
Okay.
So here they came back and they had a collab. PRS came up with this idea. So the PRS, PRS got this LAMP Fellowship, and that is how it was conceived. So in the fellowship, what happens that the applications usually open somewhere in January every year. There is an age limit of 25. So if you're 25 and below, you can apply for that fellowship.
Okay.
So in January, you know, that fellowship opens and you have to, you know, there are two primary things that you have to focus on.
Okay.
One is the statement of purpose. Why do you want to go in the fellowship? And the second is you have to write a policy article. And you know, the catch in this is that you have to, you know, substantiate both of them in 500 words.
Okay.
Why you want to be a LAMP fellow, number one. Number two, that write on the current policy, which you think is, you know, probably currently in, you know, a lot of discussion, or what you know, feel strongly about. That is the second thing. So in the LAMP fellowship, you know, during the SOP, I'll deal with the SOP first and then I'll come, you know, to the second part. In the SOP, you have to concentrate on the fact, you have to justify the fact, okay, you cannot take LAMP as a, you know, a stopgap arrangement. Okay, because a lot of people I remember, because I've been taking interviews also for the fellowship for the last 2 years. So in that interview also, when I come across a lot of SOPs, people like that I want to prepare for UPSC, that is my ultimate goal. Then why do you want to work with a politician if you want to, you know, land up doing UPSC and abuse them in the future, right? So that you know, that makes it very difficult. So it's exactly like you know, if you make it a stopgap arrangement, that becomes, you know, that makes it very difficult. So you need to understand that your purpose of going in the fellowship is to be very clear to work in a politician's office, understand the nuances of policy, understand how governance works in this country, and understand that the general setup of people who have been elected by their representative, you know, respective constituents, what is the roles and responsibilities they have. Okay, and you also have to be aware, and if you write a policy article, my usual recommendation to everybody who writes a policy article is that, you know, try not to focus on something that is being talked about everybody. Okay, so for example, if CAB is there, everybody is talking about CAB. Okay, in my time, you know, it was, I remember, in my time, I think it was a GST. So everybody was writing about GST. Okay, but I chose to write on privacy at that point of time. So my policy article was also the subject of my dissertation in my master's course. Okay, so I spoke about privacy, and you know, as luck would have it, just 1 week before my interview, the Aadhaar Act was passed. Okay, so I had to be updated at what the Aadhaar Act did. You know, what they spoke about, what was its, you know, contours of that Aadhaar Act. Okay, so you have to, you know, be very thorough with the subject that you choose. Do not write a policy article on a subject which looks fancy but you have no understanding of it. Okay, so you know, that is one thing that you need to focus on. So that is, you know, the first step of the LAMP fellowship is the interview, the policy article and your SOP. After, you know, you submit that, after around 1.5 months, you get an acceptance if you are selected. Okay, that is followed by the interview. So your interview happens somewhere in March. The interview happens.
Okay.
So in the interview process, you will be asked about your policy article. You will be asked about general knowledge. You will be asked about your ideology. You will be asked about your, you know, politician that you look up to. Okay. And I had a very, you know, interesting candidate who, you know, and that is how you know, analyze that, how politics is, you know, thought about in India. So I discussed with him that, you know, you like politicians, everything, but who's your favorite young politician? So that person said Shashi Tharoor. Okay, I said, if Shashi Tharoor is young for you, I do not know how do you, you know, kind of understand the concept of a youth leader. Okay, because Shashi Tharoor is a very accomplished person who's been in the UN for so many years, been in politics for 15 years now. So, you know, the perception of politicians, you know, that is something that people still need to understand. And that is something that should be very clear in your head once you approach for the LAMP, you know, when you sit for the LAMP interview. Because if you do not have the idea of the person you are going to work with, how do you expect to learn that? Okay, so then you have the interview process, and the interview results are out by, I think, April 1st week. So after April, you are, you know, given a choice of whether you want to accept this fellowship or not. Okay, so once you accept this fellowship, your training starts in June. Okay, so all the 50 people, and mind you, one more thing I'll like to, you know, pitch in here, that the selection ratio of a LAMP fellow is somewhere between 1:10. Okay, so you have close to 2,000 applications coming in, which gets shortlisted to somewhere around 500, you know, people for interview, and from that 50 are, you know, selected to the final lot. So you will have a diverse background of people working from you. There will be people from, engineering background, management background, tech background. Okay, some might be doctors, some might be social sciences. So, you have a very mixed cohort. And after by the end of the fellowship, you are allotted your respective MPs. Okay, so your respective MPs are, allotted depending on, and you have MPs across party lines in the fellowship. So you would have somebody from the BJP, somebody from the Trinamool Congress, somebody from the Congress, somebody from the NCP, somebody from a small party like the CPIM. Okay, so you have it, it's a broad-based thing, and you have different MPs for different parties. Okay, so that is about the LAM fellowship. And what you learn, see, the primary thing that you learn about the fellowship is, how politicians or members of parliament, because politician is a very broad term to talk about. What members of parliament work about, how is their working style. It is not that everybody can just stand up on their own whims and fancies and speak anything in the parliament. That is not how it goes about. Okay, so what LAM teaches you is that how the structure of the parliament is. If you follow the parliament, whoever watches the Lok Sabha TV, he understands the fact that parliament is structured. Okay, you will have the question hour, you will have the 0 hour, you will have the discussion on debates, you will have 377, you will have a day for the private members bill. Okay, it is not haphazard. Okay, it's a structured thing. And you cannot speak out of term, but once you have your chance, then only you can speak on it. Okay, so that is one thing that what I learned out of it, that how parliament is a very structured and well-oiled machinery. It's not a haphazard thing that it just goes about as and when people want it to. Okay, protests and disruptions are a part of it, but that is not just the only picture that it tries to portray. Okay, so LAM fellowship teaches you the intricacies of how parliamentarians work, how they address their issues, how they deal with contingencies. Okay, so that is what the LAM fellowship, and because it's an 11-month process, so that is why by the time you understand your fellowship usually gets over. So if you are smart enough, you learn a lot within that 11 months. 11 months. But if you take your time, that the MP will come up to you and say that do this work, that is not going to work. Okay. You will have to be proactive, because he is caught up with a lot of things. He has to cater to his constituency, he has to cater to his party people, he has to cater to his karyakartas. So you have to, cater to a lot of things, and that is what you need to understand. So, this has been my general understanding of the LAM fellowship. Is there any minimum requirement, academic requirement or age requirement for the See, the age requirement is you need to be less than 25 years, and the academic requirement is you need to be a graduate or in your final year of, So, for example, who's graduating out in 2020 can apply for the fellowship. So, if you're in the final year of your study, you can apply for the fellowship. And during the fellowship, you assisted a lot of member of parliaments, I presume. No, in the fellowship, you assist only one MP. Okay. During the fellowship, you are allotted to one MP and you have to work with him. Okay, and you work on continuous basis. Yeah, no, I worked with that MP I worked with in the fellowship was a BJP MP. Okay. So after 11 months, I got a call from not after 11 months, after the fellowship ended, I think after 2 or 3 months, there was a requirement in the office of Mr. Rajiv Sautav. They wanted a policy person who can look after the job. So I was approached by somebody, I applied there, he liked my work, and then I started off, working for 2 years with him. So once his tenure ended, then I started off my own individual practice in the month of November. Okay. Sir, you also would have certain set of expectations and questions during your law schools with established professionals about what's the professional growth, what's the financial growth and personal growth in litigation or corporate. So, but then we hardly know about anyone from policy sector and who comes and discuss about it. It would be great if you can put a light on what's the financial and professional and career growth involved in the policy sector, and also I personally want to know where do you yourselves see after 5 years or a short period of time, or a gradual period of time. Yeah. Well, you sound like an HR. It sounds like an HR interview, but still, the financial part of it. I always quote one thing that the concept of recession doesn't apply to politics. Okay. You can have recession in every sector, but politics is something that will never have recession. Okay. The point is, you see, your professional growth is it's a totally subjective thing to answer. Okay, because a lot of my LAM batchmates who were there with me, Not many took up, the initiative of working with a member of parliament or continue to work with them. I chose to do that because I like that work. Gradually, with the with the passage of time, that expanded. Your professional growth. See, you can understand the fact that you are sitting in a BMW if you work with a politician.
Okay.
Why I say BMW? Because you are at the first tier of governance of this country.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Okay. It is exactly like a person who starts his career with working with Abhishek Manu Singh, or a person who starts working his career with somebody of a district court lawyer. Okay. There is a huge difference between the exposure that you get at both the places. Okay, Mr. Singhvi might not give you a lot of work, but you'll learn a lot by just watching him. Okay, so your professional growth is, it's a very subjective thing to answer, because a lot of people might not like to work in a politician's office. Because politics is something that requires a lot of, perseverance. Nobody becomes an overnight politician. Okay, so yeah, that is something that you need to understand, that once you work with a politician, you have to be very sure of working on anything. It is not like any other profession that, okay, today this case has come up, so I'll research on this today. Tomorrow that case has come up, I research on. You know for a fact in the litigation sphere, you will know that, okay, the judge is there, the institution is there. For a parliamentarian, today he has to stand and speak on agricultural reforms. Tomorrow he'll have to stand up and speak on the budget, on fiscal policy and monetary policy. One day he'll have to start and talk about highways. One day you'll have to talk about healthcare. So you cannot limit yourself to one. So somebody who's enterprising or who likes to work on myriad issues, for them this is the perfect avenue, because you have to work on everything under the sun.
Exactly.
Okay, there is nothing that you can push your hands off. You say that, sir, I do not know, I cannot help you on this. Okay. And you have, and the best part is that you have to think on your feet. You have to provide solution within seconds, within minutes. At times, something might crop up immediately. Okay, he'll call me up. Okay, Praveer, I have to speak on this in 10 minutes. Let me know what has to be done. Okay. So if you're not aware about that topic, how are you going to help? Right? He has kept you for the fact that you will provide him background support. For that, you have to be ready. Okay. So for working in the financial part, what you say, see, it's a varied thing. Not every lawyer turns up to become or charge fees like Mr. Jethmalani in the longer run, even after 50 years of practice, right? Exactly. So in this sphere, it's a very open-ended market. Okay, you might get lucky, you might not get that remuneration, because see, for a politician, he has some myriad things to spend his money on. Okay. Understand the thing that he has to, there are a lot of time that he has to do a lot of philanthropy also from his own pocket to give somebody from his constituency who has come in and he wants some help, and you cannot say a no to them, right? Yeah. So please understand the fact that politicians also have their own paying capacity. Okay. So that is also one aspect that needs to be, you have to cater to. And from the perspective of your growth, you learn to see a lot of things which a lot of people aspire to do. Okay, so what happens that it becomes a kind of a boring issue also at times, because when I meet my friends at parties, everybody discusses politics, and that is my job, which I do on a daily basis. Right? So when you discuss politics, I'm like, please, this is something I do on a daily basis. Please, let's talk about something else. Okay. Exactly. So, I always, quote this statement that politics and cricket and food, these are the three things that can, bind every stranger in this country. Yeah. Okay. Everybody has an opinion about these three things. Exactly. Okay. From a nukkad to a high-end 5-star hotel meeting, everybody discusses politics. Okay. From the financial perspective, I say, okay, yes, monetary aspect is one of it, but you get to experience a lot of things. Okay, you understand the system which is governing 130 crore population of this country, which is not a small task. Okay, 543 plus 250 in the Rajya Sabha, 800 people managing 130 crore aspirations of their constituents, aspiration of their states, aspiration of their people. Okay, it is not an easy job to do. Exactly. Okay, and I always say that we've seen a lot of raging debate about mental health. I always say that if you have to learn about mental health, watch a politician. Okay, because it is so difficult that every 5 years you have to go to the public. You lose an election and you are nowhere to be seen. Okay, but you see the the level of strength they have of their character, that again they try again for 5 years, again fight an election, minute lose it, get a ministerial berth, lose out on a ministerial berth. Okay, but that doesn't deter them from leaving that profession.
Okay.
Nobody retires from politics. Okay, that is the the best part about it. There is no retirement in politics. Okay, Mr. Prakash Singh Badal is doing politics till the age of 90.
Right.
And Mr. Tejasvi Surya has entered at the age of 28. Okay, so there is no upper and lower limit of age.
Okay.
A person has become a member of parliament at the age of 28 also, and Mr. Devagowda has become a member of parliament at the age of 88 also. Okay, so there is no upper or lower limit to entering in politics, and that is the best part about it. Okay.
So, sir, definitely that's you said apt about policy and its involvement in politics. Was your role during these yesteryears was specific to legislative and policy advisory, or there is a bigger ambit of policy advisory, or a lot of other verticals related to politics comes within the ambit of policy advisory, or did you got any chance to cater the other verticals of politics in your yesteryears?
See, that is a very interesting question. See, working in a politician, it is like a multi-dimensional work that you have to do. So what happens that in a politician's office, okay, policy, legislative affairs, parliamentary affairs is one part of it. But it also depends on the person you are working with. So suppose if that person holds any organizational post, like in my case, Mr. Satha was the in charge. He was the secretary in charge, and then he became the general secretary in charge. So I had a lot of time working in the Gujarat Congress. Okay, so I worked with a lot of local politicians who used to call me for, they somehow gathered my number, used to call me, sir, ye aise, kaise karna hai. Used to pitch this. I also used to handle his social media accounts. So on Twitter, you have to be very innovative to write a lot of things.
Thanks, sir.
That, okay, somebody has, like if you see a lot of, humor is going on Twitter these days, that people are pulling out statements of the BJP back from 2013. Ki China ko laal dikhana and these things. So, you also have to be very, alert to these things also. And what you write on social media becomes a problem later on. Okay, so social media is also a very interesting place to work on. Okay,
Exactly.
so because you have to, because social media, whatever a politician does, okay, everybody has to, give an answer. He has to give that on social media. Okay, everything has to be put out on social media. You have to give your comments on foreign policy, agriculture policy, whatever the government does. If you are in the opposition, you have to give your views on every other thing. But if you are in the government, you have to portray the achievements of the government. Okay. And one interesting anecdote that, the most, probably highlight I thought what I had to do was, I remember this Rafale debate was going on in the parliament back in 2018. Okay, there was a no confidence motion. Okay, and the person I was working with, and this was highlighted a lot in the news channels also, he asked me to make a paper plane. Okay.
Okay.
Which should be in the kind of it should look like Rafale. You have to write Rafale on it. Okay. And I was a bit skeptical. I told him, sir, doesn't look good. We cannot fly planes in the parliament. It's not a classroom. Okay. So he said, let's do something innovative. Like, okay, I made it. And he flew that plane. Okay. And that fell right in front of Mr. Arun Jaitley, who was defending the government at that point of time. Okay. And and later it also got featured in the Prime Minister when he was replying to the the debate on the no confidence motion. He said very clearly, he said that लोगों ने यहाँ हवाई जहाज भी उड़ाई, ठीक है, but वो इतनी ऊपर नहीं उड़ सकी कि सदन की मर्यादा को पार कर सके. Okay.
Exactly.
So he was also very livid with what had happened. Okay, but see, politics involves a lot of theatrics also.
Okay.
Okay, so and I remember there was one MP from the TDP. He just passed away last year. He used to, always come up dressed as different individuals on a daily basis to protest. Okay, so someday he would become Nag Devta, someday he would become, a rickshaw wala, someday he would become something else. Okay, so there are a lot of theatrics also that politicians do. Okay, so and also a few days back I remember somebody was protesting. So they carried out the procession of a motorbike.
Okay.
Motorbike was put on an earthy and people are carrying it that now diesel has, and a lot of jokes came up that diesel had become Atmanirbhar now, that it is, far more costlier than petrol. Okay. So, you know, a lot of, it's not only about policy, there are a lot of other interesting things also that happen. And one thing that, I learned working in a, parliamentarian's office is the variety of people that come to you to meet the MP.
Exactly.
And once this, they have so many ideas they want to pitch. Okay. Which can be vague as well, which can be substantial as well. And most of the time MP might be busy and he will say that, okay, you cater to this person, you talk to him, ask him what he wants to, tell. So, that understanding human behavior is also something that you understand while working in a parliamentarian's office. So that is also a brilliant thing that I've learned. But, in politics, you have all kinds of people walking into the office.
Okay.
And interaction helps them, understand that every strata of the society or every section of the country, what is their thought process about politicians or governance or any general matter for that matter. So this has been my, basic learning in that office.
I don't know whether you have observed it in the Zoom chat box. We Push Lamba sir gave
Lamba, hello Lamba sir, how are you? Thank you so much for your kind words first.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you sir for sparing time and attending the session. As you told about your anecdote, one of the anecdotes of your past experience, I remember that you also did political campaigning and booth management for INC during Saurashtra elections. Would you like to share some some of your humorous or any light experience which you had during such election campaigning, or what was your
Gujarat election? I'll tell you, it was a very interesting election on a lot of counts. I've provided the background earlier at my in the session. That there were a lot of things at play at that point of time. You had the GST, you had the demonetization. Okay, you had the Patidar agitation. So it was a tough shift for both the Congress and the BJP. And because I worked in the Saurashtra region, the interesting part of Saurashtra region is Saurashtra, historically has been a very, it has been a stronghold for the BJP. The chief minister of the then chief minister, Mr. Modi, the first time he contested an election in 2002 was from Rajkot, which falls in the Saurashtra region. So what I learned is the fact that there is a lot of minute level details that you have to cater to. So you have to identify a lot of pressure groups, influential people within that region who can get votes for you, might follow your ideology. There are business groups, there are business organizations. Okay, then there are local traders, because Gujarat is predominantly a business state. So you have a lot of people working in that aspect.
Okay.
So you have to understand that there might be a village that will be a traditional voter base of the BJP. Okay, which will never vote for the Congress. There might be a constituency that will vote for the Congress and not for the BJP.
Exactly.
So you have to map those regions also. Okay, because you cannot spend your time in devoting something where that people, irrespective of what happens, are not going to vote for my party.
Okay.
Okay, so you have to identify these certain structures, get a structure in place and focus on those areas. So Saurashtra is predominantly a rural belt.
Okay.
So if you see the Gujarat election results, the urban seats were won by the BJP and the rural seats were won by the Congress. Major of them. Okay. So that gave you an analysis, and we did an analysis also after the elections. The report which was sent to the High Command also. So we worked on the report and we analyzed that that the rural belts are very heavily voting for the Congress, but the urban belt is not. What is the reason behind that? That takes me to the historical origin of the BJP in Gujarat. BJP has always thrived in urban areas. Urban voters are the stronghold of the BJP.
Okay.
Right. So be it Baroda, be it Ahmedabad, be it any other urban area of Gujarat, they'll always vote for the BJP. So that is one interesting anecdote that I understood in terms of elections, because prior to 2014, I think the professionalization of election management in India somewhere began in 2012, when Prashant Kishore had helped Mr. Narendra Modi in the Gujarat elections. Okay, so that is how it has gone from there. It has taken a lot of stride. Now everybody knows what IPAC is. Everybody knows what ABN is doing. Election management has become a business in itself. Everybody is getting into election management. Everybody is getting into profiling, social media management. tackling ground root support, going into service, understanding. Okay, so that it was a brilliant thing to see that elections are not fought only on prime time television debates. There's a lot of thing that goes on the ground. Okay, so that is one thing that the Saurashtra election taught me. So, and that has been a very interesting, I would also recommend the people who are attending this webinar to go and back and analyze the Gujarat elections and how that particular election folded. There were so many allegations, counter allegations, speeches, policy measures, everything happened. So it was a very interesting, and from the policy side, it was a very interesting election to watch.
Okay. Sir, definitely you spoke a lot about policy. You worked with both, government in power and the opposition party too. You would have experienced it that the political parties definitely formulate their policy mandates according to their popular perception-based appeasement. However, a lot of these policies are not feasible, when they are implemented on ground level. What would be your opinion on this gap between policymakers and politicians and its implementation? How successful is that implementation? Yeah.
See, the topic that you've said that, there are policies that are being made, whether they're implemented on ground, whether they're successful or not. Okay, so see, I am reminded of a very famous speech that was given by Lord Laws from the British Court of Appeals. He once said that he was speaking on why judicial review should not go into policy matters. So he said that, see, the role of the judiciary is logical, but the role of the governance or political governance, it's empirical and experimental. Okay, any policy, you cannot be short of any policy succeeding or failing when you are trying to make that, because any policy is a totally experimental step on the basis of the political masters who are governing it. Okay, so if you do not understand the fact that, see, and the policy and the implementation becomes a problem, because in India, policy, public policy and public perception do not go hand in hand.
Exactly.
Okay, public perception reflects in policy or not, that is a questionable thing. Okay, so for example, if for example, what is happening in current situation, that brings a lot of attention on why policy measures are required, taking the public opinion into hand. So the migration problem happened, the healthcare problem happened, the economic downturn is happening. Why are these happening? Okay, because you came up with something of the kind of COVID came up, which had no standing operating procedure. Okay, nobody knew. Okay, how to go about this, because you don't have public opinion, you do not know what the public wants. Okay, so in terms of healthcare, you are reserving beds for COVID, but what about people who are ailing from some diseases of cardiovascular or related to pulmonary or something like that?
Exactly.
They get into trouble. That is a life-threatening disease. You get a cardiac arrest and you are gone within seconds.
Okay.
You don't have a chance to react. Right? There you require emergency medical care. Okay. So my point has always been that public perception should always be reflected in public policy. Okay. And public policy is such a wide domain that you cannot, answer that thing. And one aspect where and also one thing about the good thing about the Indian population is that when any policy is debated, it is debated wholeheartedly. So for example, if you see CAB, everybody has jumped into giving opinion about CAB. Okay. Yeah. It is a policy matter. Right. But if you were to ask anybody to talk about, telecom revolution or, telecom consolidation, not everybody can speak about it because you do not know the basic elements of it. How the telecom industry works, what are the regulations, what does a TRAI do, how this the investment is Jio is going to take it forward. How are you going to do that? Right, that becomes a big problem. Okay, so implementation on the and one more problem that we face, Raghav, is that the implementation of policy is so much graded. By the time it reaches the beneficiary, it doesn't serve the purpose that it wants to.
Exactly.
Okay, so policy is made in Delhi, gets implemented in the state, goes to the panchayat, that time go to the district magistrate, block development officer. There are so many levels to it that it creates a problem. Okay, so for any policy to succeed, it should have substantial public opinion also.
Okay.
And see, if you see the budget which is presented every year on 1st February, the pre-budget consultation meetings, they start off from somewhere 6 months before the budget is being made. So the finance minister will talk to all the groups, the agriculture group, business groups, okay, startup groups, food processing groups. So they will take into account everybody's suggestion, and then the budget is framed.
Okay.
Okay. So and one thing about the budget is that nobody criticizes the budget most of the times.
Okay.
You see on debate, everybody is happy with the budget, but nobody knows that what is the budget is about.
Exactly.
The only part of budget that we know is what is shown in the media or what the finance minister says in a speech. We do not need to go into the details of it, that how much money has been allocated to this particular scheme. Okay, what are the fiscal changes that have been made? What are the FRBM targets that have been set up? Okay, nobody cares about that, which is a big problem. Because reading the finances of a country is a very tough exercise, and that is where policy advisors come into play. Because everybody looks forward to having something for the constituency or the people in the budget. How do you do that? You prepare a representation, you tell the concerned minister that you have to include this, you have to exclude that. So implementation of the policy is a challenge in not just India, every country. Okay, and in US, what happens in policy making, you do not have a bureaucratic system in place. You have people from the academia, you have people from the corporate sector, academicians coming into play and designing a policy. In India, that is the problem. Because of the bureaucratic control, any individual who might be a very specialist in the policy is not is not able to enter into that system. So that is something that needs a lot of change, and this government has taken a heads up by appointing 10 joint secretaries from the private sector, which is a good start, and I hope that this government takes that forward also.
So that's absolutely true. Sir, seeing the present situation of COVID-19 and future uncertainties related to it, what do you think how policy could have helped in resolving some economic and legal issues which we are facing at the present moment? Definitely, looking at the legislature which currently is used in hand, we have Epidemic Disease Act and National Disaster Management Act in order to cater and counter the pandemic effects. Definitely, it has a lot of loopholes. What is, in your view, how these loopholes can be eradicated? And you, as a political advisor, what's your take? What actions could we could have taken previously, and what actions now we can take? What policies can be formulated so that we come up with a better solution than these these acts which are having a lot of flaws and those acts which are more than even a century old. Yeah.
See, your question about the Epidemic Diseases Act and the National Disaster Management Act of 2005. See, one interesting fact about the Epidemic Diseases Act is that it is followed by both India and Pakistan. Okay, so there are very few things that bond both India and Pakistan together, because we were ruled by the same Britishers for so many years. And this act was formulated in 1897. So the person who must have formulated must have taken a rebirth and died again. It is that old.
Exactly.
Okay, 123 years. Okay. And at that point of time, epidemic disease and the dichotomy or the irony, whatever you call it, is the fact that India has taken recourse to a 3-page law, to a short law, to solve the biggest problem it has faced till date.
Exactly.
Okay. So the Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897, it is a 4-section act. It doesn't define epidemic. It doesn't define pandemic. And the flaw in that act is it doesn't keep up to the modern times. That is the biggest thing. Okay. So in India, the problem is that the policy sector activates when a disaster has happened. So the Disaster Management Act came after the tsunami had taken place in 2004. Then we understood the need for a Disaster Management Act, knowing the fact that we had an earthquake in Bhuj, we had so many natural calamities happening every now and then, even before 2004. But still we chose to take action when that such a big incident happened. Okay, Same was the case if you see in the Factories Act also. The Factories Act is, dates back to, just after the independence. But when the Bhopal gas tragedy happened in 1984, that took, that brought an amendment in 1987 at how to deal with hazardous substances. Okay, that is another example. So Epidemic Diseases Act, it's a, archaic legislation. And if you read back the history of it, it was, used for combating, at that point of time, plague in Bombay. It was usually a place in Mandvi in Gujarat, which used to be in the state of Bombay at that point of time. And this is not the first time that it has been used. It was used by Maharashtra government also some years back in Pune to combat swine flu. It was used by it was used in Chandigarh to combat malaria and dengue back in 2015. Okay, so this is not the first time that it has been used. It has been used for a lot of instances. Just that because of the COVID situation, everybody is aware of it. And same is the case is disaster management. Now, if you read the genesis, the biggest problem with disaster management in India is that it doesn't feature into any of the 3 lists in the 7th schedule.
Okay.
Okay. Disaster Management Act was framed under, if you go and read the history of the act, it was framed by the central government using its power under the union list under the head of social security and employment. And it doesn't concern any of them.
Exactly.
Okay. So disaster management is not included in that particular aspect, which is problematic. So neither the states can legislate and the center use its power under Article 248, that's called the residuary, powers to legislate to bring in a disaster management act. But the states don't have power. And in these cases where disaster happens, you need to have a very proper coordination between the center and the state.
Okay.
Okay. In the Disaster Management Act, the nodal authority is the Ministry of Home Affairs. Okay, which has a national executive, which is chaired by the Union Home Secretary. In the COVID case, they had to delegate that power to the Health Secretary. Because the Home Secretary or the Home Ministry was not equipped to handle a medical crisis.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is one loophole that we need to understand, and I think in the coming Parliament session, I'm very sure of the fact that if not the government, any private member bill will definitely come on need for a Public Healthcare Act. We had a Public Healthcare Act in 1955, but the states chose not to adopt it because health being a state subject. And I think I worked with one of the MPs who has proposed the private members bill to shift health from state to concurrent list, so that we have both the center and the state legislating on issues or coming up with regulation when some of a pandemic happens. So this pandemic has sprung across and brought a lot of challenges for people, and this is one of them, that disaster management doesn't find a place in the Constitution. So when you don't have your powers to make a policy, only the center uses its extraordinary powers under the Constitution. You cannot expect them to laws cannot be implemented at one go. There is a lot of process that goes behind it. You cannot expect a law to give results immediately. It has to be on an empirical basis.
Exactly.
Right? You get data out of it, you understand whether that happens, and then you take a decision. Right. So, for example, Manrega, has faced a lot of criticism. But in the current situation, because it has a backing of being a legislation, it is one of the biggest job providers of rural economy.
Yes.
People are resorting to it, state governments are resorting to Manrega to give employment. Right. So that is the impact of a policy. If Manrega would have happened just before the COVID and not somewhere in 2004 or 2005, it would have been a problem. And many people, this is a misnomer which is there. Many people think that the Manrega was brought by the Congress. But the brain behind it was a person called Raghuvansh Prasad Singh from the RJD, who is a very known farmers leader and has a very good grasp of it. That helped Manrega give the shape. In a similar way, when Mr. Jairam Ramesh piloted the Land Acquisition Act, because he has been into the policy side for a long period of time. So when he brought the Land Acquisition Act, or when he brought out a debate on P.T. Brinjal at that point of time, there was a lot of resistance to genetically modified crops. So you need a person of understanding when you bring out a policy that gives it more weightage. Okay, so if you have a person of understanding, that helps a lot. So that is about the policy thing, that it has to be empirical and experimental.
Okay.
No policy can succeed unless you do not see a result. So I think a policy should be time bound and result oriented. That should be the target group of.
Okay, speaking about the policy, what is your stand on the self-reliance policy which the government is adopting, and it's boasting about it and motivating these national people to take up and go for Make in India products and like stuff. How what do you think also that how this policy is able to cater the economic ordeal, and how we can come up with the downturn which has been faced by the Indian economy so far?
See what the Prime Minister said, like being self-reliant and being what we usually call Atmanirbhar now. See the question, there are twofold problems that we have. Right?
Okay.
So one is migration, okay, and one is the economic downturn. Why I say migration becomes a problem? Because we have to deal with not only the migrant crisis within the country, but the international migrants who are going to come back to the country now.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. You have so many people, expats working in Gulf countries, US, Europe, Middle East. There also COVID is going to, kind of impact the industry. So they are not going to throw out the native people. They are going to throw out expats or people who are come from other countries. Okay. So we have to also tackle the fact that the people who've come back from, international, foreign countries, how to absorb them also. So self-reliance is a good call. I totally, I think that it's a decent call in terms of what we are, because the economic activity is going to take a lot of time to pick up now. Because it has suddenly stagnated, and you cannot expect an economy to suddenly burst out and the economic metrics to shoot up to the roof immediately after everything has been opened up. It has to be done gradually. And I look at it as an opportunity, because Make in India as a policy had, again I say that why it should be time centric and had a specific goal. Make in India had a a target of having increasing India's share in manufacturing of GDP to 25% till 2025. Okay, from the current 17%. But now that the manufacturing is going to further contract, that share is going to go down. So our timeline for the next 5 years to be focus on manufacturing. How do we focus on manufacturing? You have to be self-reliant for that. And how that self-reliance comes into play, that you have to promote a lot of people, to create jobs. The government cannot all and out, we are a country of 130 crore people. Our population is a boon and a bane both for us. So now that the China has been countered in by a lot of countries because of the COVID, and they have planned to shift out their business operations, so that the closest location for them could be India. Right? You can engage healthcare, and I think the COVID, one good thing that the COVID has done, that it has brought the attention on healthcare services.
Exactly.
So we spent close to 60, the union budget this year allotted 67,000 crore for the Union Health Ministry, which is equivalent to the money that was spent in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Okay. So for a population of 130 crore, 67,000 crore doesn't make any sense. That is the first thing. And secondly, we have to give a lot of, emphasis on research and development in the medical sector. So for people like migrants or people who are unskilled, skilling is one of the things that has to be done. So for example, the government launched this employment program, the Garib Kalyan Yojana a few days back, where people in 116 districts where migrants, have been found in the highest quantity. They'll be given, employment under various schemes of the government. The Jal Shakti Yojana or Adarsh Yojana, everything. So that will create a lot of jobs. But the problem that, comes up with this is that migrants are one aspect of it. But you also have to see about unskilled laborers. So skilling is going to be a big problem. So skilling is something that needs to be taken, and, the government will go on with its initiative. That is true. But somewhere the citizens also have to contribute in this
to it. Yeah.
era of, uncertainty and problems that are going on. So without that, it has to be, a balance between both of them. So I think self-reliance is something that needs to be, taken up seriously and not just as a meme. Okay. It has to be, people have to think about it. People have to, try and, get into some kind of self-sustaining businesses. And the government can provide handholding, but the government also has to be proactive. So it has to be done on, both the ends, and both the parties have to come, equally on this particular subject.
Okay. We'll quickly refer to the academic questions which have been posted in the group chat. One of the questions which has been posted by Sundaram Iyer is how many parliamentary committees are there, and what are their layers to it? Would you like to address it?
Okay. Standing committees are a method to keep a check on the executive. So standing committees, there are close to, I think, in my calculation, there are 24 or 25 standing committees. Okay. So there are certain committee, each committee caters to around, there might be, committees which caters to just one ministry. And there are committees which caters to 3 or 4 ministries combined who have the same objective. So like if you see the Ministry of, the Standing Committee on Culture, Tourism and Science and Technology. So these 3 departments are clubbed into one committee.
Exactly.
And you have members from both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha in this. And their job is, to scrutinize the government, whatever the policies the ministry is bringing, number one. And number two, all the, budgetary details of that ministry. So once the budget is declared, you have a 1 month break in the parliament. And then the standing committee, scrutinizes the finances of that thing. Okay, that how much money is given to scheme, why has ministry not done this thing, what steps should the ministry take. So here the role of an MP becomes very important in the committee meeting. Because there he can openly express his feelings. There is a bipartisanship in that, and there is no parties that you have to adhere to. There's no proposition and opposition in that committee meetings. Everybody is open to expressing their views. And if if that person who's asked this question, I'm sorry I didn't get his name, if he's interested, he can go to the website of the standing committees and see the work that has been done. Okay, so there are myriad issues which the standing committee is scrutinizes, and voluminous data is bypassed through the committee, and MPs are given an opportunity to ask questions on policy matters. So standing committee is one of the very important tools in the hand of the MPs to kind of give an answer to policy related issues.
Next question is how questions are asked in SLAT interview. So please, can you tell me? Yeah, Shreyansh has this question.
Symbiosis interview.
Yeah, he has mentioned it's SLAT.
See, the SLAT process, I think during my time, we used to have a GD and a PI. I think now the process has been changed to have a 5 ad form. Okay, so in the SLAT examination process, you have to understand the fact that obviously you prepared for that examination, you have read about GK, you read about basic legal topics. So see, you need to understand that you have to be aware of, for very basic questions. Like a lot of questions people ask, who's the Law Minister of India? Okay, who's the Attorney General of India? Who's the Chief Justice? There might be some legal concepts that you have asked. So in SLAT interview, my basic understanding has been that they always cover things that you've read during your preparation to the examination. Okay, and just like and whatever CV you keep it in front of them, your question mostly is out of that. Okay, so it is because the interviewer only knows what you present to him. Right, he has not done any background research on you that he knows that what you do. He will only ask you questions on what you have, what the information that you put in front of him. So be very thorough with the information that you give, and don't try to sound fancy on things that you don't know about. So I think that is one of the major, suggestions for interview process.
Another question is, every policy looks good on paper, but its implementation, it's the implementation where failure happens. What's your take on this? I would like to add to this question. Do you think public opinion impacts or can change implementation and make a major failure into a positive implementation?
See, public opinion. The problem is, it is very well said in India. We are in India. The political leadership is able to get across its work because it is a united minority against a divided majority.
Exactly.
Okay. So because there are so fractured, thinking of people, that it makes it a bit difficult. Now, we have had a lot of instances where public opinion has defined, created, or influenced the policy. The first primary example I would give is of the Lokpal Bill. So back in 2011, when Anna Hazare started his movement, for the Lokpal, everybody, started, kind of protesting that we need a Lokpal, we need transparency, the Prime Minister's office should cover under the Lokpal. So that, pressurized the government into giving into that, right? The government had to, somewhere bring in that law. Why? Because public opinion was very strongly in its favor. Similar was the question with if you see in terms of public opinion identifying a policy, we see a lot of emphasis on the CAB also. Okay, CAB, if you see, the CAB talks about taking a lot of people from who are refugees who've been staying in India for a long period of time and have not been granted citizenship. Okay, so that particular strata is also forcing you. So for any policy to be made, okay, and the most important thing that happened, I think, I don't know how many of you remember, back in 2012 after the Nirbhaya case happened, everybody rooted for changes in the Indian Penal Code. And then the JS Verma committee happened, and we had the putting in stringent conditions within the Indian Penal Code. Similarly, after the Kathua rape case that happened, changes, ordinance was brought to make child rape more penalizing and bringing in death sentence, amending the POCSO Act. Okay, so on sensitive issues, when the public outcry happens, the government has to accept it. The government cannot get away with it. So public opinion to a very large extent, but the problem is that public is not aware of it.
Exactly.
Public doesn't want to participate.
Okay.
So, for example, if the government puts up a policy on the internet and invites suggestion for it, how many of the people participate in that?
Very few.
Very few. For example, I have been working on the Data Protection Act. Now, the Data Protection Act is something that is going to, affect everybody. Because everybody is, is in contact with technology in some mode or the other. Okay, but nobody cares about, sending representations, talking about it, that data protection could be a problem. Okay, so the issue is that the understanding of policy is flawed in India. Okay, people think that Lok Sabha में जो debate हो रहा है, जो burning issues है, जिस पे आप बहस कर सकते हो, लड़ सकते हो, that is policy. That is not the fact. There are a lot of other things that are going to affect you, but you are not aware of it.
Exactly.
So that one problem, I think that is where law students can make an impact, because law students have a better understanding of policy, owing to their educational background and the teachings that they are done. Because policy flows out from the constitution. That is where everything flows out.
Exactly.
Okay. So if you have policy in your, if you have a sound understanding of the legal process, understanding policy becomes a bit easier for you as compared to other people. So I think lawyers can, very much contribute, and Curious for Law can also, go ahead and, taking initiatives on writing on issues which are, under consideration and creating awareness about it.
That was really a great experience with you, sir, so far. And thank you for sharing your insight. No one has so far, been a resource for us on policy aspect of politics. This will definitely assist us and help us in our future endeavors. We wish you all the success, and thank you for sparing your precious time for us. That's all.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Raghav, for all the insightful questions.
Thank you.
It became interesting for me also to answer so detailed questions from law, and coming from law students, it makes it more easy for me to answer. And thank you for all thank you to all the participants also for the questions, and to the organizers and everyone. And I had a great time interacting and answering a lot of questions. I look forward to many more sessions in the future.
Sure,
and I hope Curious for Law will take up and promote why policy making can be a good professional career for a lot of people.
Exactly.
With that, thank you so much, and all the best to you guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We also look for future assistance with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.